Hi, everyone. Welcome to the All Things Amyloid podcast, where we feature patients, caregivers, and clinicians who discuss amyloidosis, a rare and incurable disease. Amyloidosis occurs when the body builds up abnormal amounts of misfolded amyloid protein, which can lead to serious and life threatening outcomes. I'm your host, Mackenzie, an amyloidosis patient and founder of Mackenzie's Mission. Our goal for this podcast is to raise awareness and share firsthand what it's like to live with this disease, to care for those affected by it, and to treat it. We hope this leads to earlier diagnosis and start of treatment, which will improve patient lives. There are many views across our patient community on the topic of disease knowledge. Some folks may find it empowering to know as much as they can about amyloidosis. Others may be 180 degrees in the other direction. It's just not something they want to focus on and prefer to leave it to the experts. And then there are folks in between. In today's episode, we'll be talking with Darlene, an amyloidosis patient, about staying current on research and treatments. Why does she do it? Where does she do her research? And how often? Darlene, welcome. Thank you for joining us today on our podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me to talk today. I appreciate it.
Of course. So, to get started, perhaps you share your view on why staying current on research and treatments is so important, and whether there was something that really crystallized your view on kind of maintaining research and knowledge about the disease.
It started with me when I was little, when my parents would say, "Because I said so." That was never good enough for me.
Yeah.
Telling me I had to do something and not giving me the whys just didn't sit well. So, with this experience with amyloidosis and multiple myeloma, it began when I started looking in some of my medical records. I would see wrong information. I would see inaccurate histories. I would find even somebody else's lab work in my chart. I also got triggered because I got some wrong treatments. In particular, I was prescribed a beta blocker, knowing that I had cardiac amyloidosis, and didn't know it right away, and didn't start researching things right away. Initially, I was far too ill to even be able to pick up and read a book, let alone research papers. But as I started feeling better, that's when I noticed all of these problems with my records and problems with some of my treatments. I also inquired of my doctor how many amyloidosis patients he had seen. And when I uncovered that in his 13 years of practice, that I was one of 2 patients with this disease, I said, "Oh my, that concerned me." I really liked him. I knew he listened well to me, but only 2 patients in 13 years. And realistically, I couldn't expect him to be up on all of the research information and all of the treatments. Doctors are busy. It wasn't, I couldn't imagine him going home at night and reading research projects just because he had a patient with this disease. So I decided I can read. I'm intelligent. I should try to get up on what's important, what treatments are necessary, what drugs I might be having.
Certainly a number of red flags there that you mentioned, but let's go back and let's talk a little bit more about being prescribed the beta blocker and just how it being the wrong treatment for the disease that you have.
I was given a beta blocker, and I immediately noticed that I was feeling lightheaded. I was experiencing episodes of low blood pressure. I would have dizzy spells where I felt like I might pass out. And right about this point in time, I discovered smart patients. And I was reading about other people's experiences. And one of the group discussions came up about cardiac amyloidosis. And people were talking about how some people were getting improper treatments and being treated with a beta blocker. Now, pretty much cardiologists prescribe beta blockers frequently. It's a very common treatment for congestive heart failure and other cardiac problems. So um, it was within my doctor's normal purview to prescribe beta blockers.
Mm-hmm.
But as I started reading more on smart patients, I said, I'm not getting the best of care for this rare disease. I think I need to find some experts. So that started my search to see where I could find somebody who really knew about this. And of course, I was pointed in the direction from people on Smart Patients and some of the other websites. Go to Mayo Rochester. That's the absolute best place. So that is exactly what I did. I was reluctant to confront my local cardiologist about the treatment he was giving me because I wasn't feeling very knowledgeable myself at that point in time. But I did tell him that I felt a need for a second opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through with that process, and indeed, I went to Mayo Clinic. And at Mayo, they had specialists in cardiac amyloidosis. It wasn't just specialists in amyloidosis. They have subspecialties even. So the cardiologist at Mayo contacted my local cardiologist and told him this drug is absolutely contraindicated for patients with cardiac amyloidosis.
So, on an ongoing basis, right? It's clear that your research and your knowledge proved extraordinarily beneficial in kind of coming to the realization that you were on a drug that was potentially doing you harm. But on a more ongoing long-term basis, why do you choose to stay current on research and treatments and things that are happening in the field?
I feel that having some idea of risk factors for some of the drugs that you're taking, so you can be aware and alert. So I even read some of those drug inserts. um, but I also feel because of this diagnosis and the knowledge that a relapse is very likely,
Mhm.
that it's important to stay up on what treatments might be available, what research is being done, um, who's doing it, where, because if you relapse, you may not have all that much time to find some of those answers.
Mm.
So I just think having that in your knowledge base points you in the right direction early on instead of waiting until you go through treatment after treatment that are unsuccessful. I also like to be able to go in and talk with my doctors about some of the treatments that I'm receiving.
Mhm.
I, I'm the kind of person that has been known to come in with a research article, hand it to my doctor, and said,
Mhm.
"Let me talk about this."
Yeah.
And they're used to me by now, but
Yeah.
that is that is my modus of operating. Um, I also think because it is a rare disease, that I need to take responsibility for being knowledgeable about it. The more informed that I am, the more I can participate in decisions
Mhm.
and have confidence in the choices I'm making, confidence in the questions I ask. And that whole idea of just being prepared for when things might change, when you relapse, or when you start with some new drug side effects. Um, I think it's important.
Yeah, I think you make some really excellent points as to the value in being up to date on research and treatments. And, with this disease, sometimes you have to be your own advocate. So having that knowledge is really important. And taking it a little bit further, what are some of the resources? Are there any sites or journals in particular, or any resources that you really lean on when you're doing your research on these kind of things?
When I'm looking into treatments and looking for research, I go to a website called Spark Cures. They have information about trials all over the world, and it's a really good consolidated resource. Smart Patients is another source that I really, really like. Most of the people that go to that website have an interest in providing very accurate information, and they'll often include research studies that they've read or information about new drugs coming on the market. And I found them to be really um, very accurate and concerned.
Hmm.
Um, there's also amyloidosis support groups. That is another valuable patient forum. I also keep in touch with some other patients that I've
Mhm.
met. And sometimes we talk on the phone, sometimes we share articles. Because I have that dual diagnosis, I also go to the International Myeloma Foundation website. That's a real good resource. And I also happen to have several family members who are in the medical field. So I go to my family, my husband, my son, my daughter, and they are also very good consultants with access to everything from up to date to MedPage to you name it. We've got it available.
Mhm.
And another unusual place that I've found information is even the Wall Street Journal.
Hmm.
Uh, Reading some of the financial pages, articles come up about drugs before they are being marketed. It's really another place that I've found some things.
Interesting. I wouldn't have necessarily guessed the financial section of the Wall Street Journal, but it makes sense. It certainly does. But building on that, how much time and frequency, kind of with what frequency do you dedicate time to doing this sort of research?
Well, initially, when I knew little or nothing about my disease, I was probably spending 25, 30 hours a week
Wow.
trying to get up to speed, studying things like the lab tests that were available. I just, um, because I do not have a medical degree. I do have a PhD, but not a medical degree. But today, I would say on a daily basis, I spend an hour, hour and a half going
Mhm.
some of my resources.
A significant time really is dedicated to kind of advancing your knowledge on the topic. So, in closing, for those that are interested in staying current on available research and treatments, any thoughts, any tidbits, words of wisdom for those folks?
From my perspective, when you have a rare disease, I think it's very important for you to become knowledgeable about this disease because to expect your doctors or the nurse practitioners, the PAs, whoever's seeing you to have that wealth of knowledge that's out there, I just don't think that's reasonable. I also believe having information makes you more able to advocate for yourself. And I really feel that we as patients need to be partners with our medical teams, that to expect them to handle it all isn't reasonable. And frankly, I believe that investing in yourself is important and worthwhile.
Yeah, I think you make some great points. And Darlene, we so very much appreciate you sharing your thoughts on this topic and joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. I certainly see and understand your perspective and would imagine that having this kind of knowledge can be extraordinarily empowering as well. I mean, there's so much that this disease can take from you that you aren't in control of, yet knowledge can be power. And bringing some element of control into decisions surrounding your disease journey is really valuable. And I know that others will appreciate this discussion. So thank you again. Thank you for listening to the All Things Amyloid podcast. If you find our podcast informative, please follow and share it with others. If you want to learn more about the work we're doing at Mackenzie's Mission, please visit mm713.org. We'd also like to thank AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals, Alexion Pharmaceuticals, Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, and Bridge Biopharma for their sponsorship to help raise awareness about amyloidosis. We hope you stay tuned for future episode drops. Thanks for listening.